On my birthday, my grandfather came to visit me. "Did you like the car I sent you last year?" I replied. "What car?" I didn't receive anything. My grandfather looked at my parents, who had pale faces, and chaos broke out. "My name is Alexander, and for as long as I can remember, I have always been the least favored son in my family. It's not something one can ignore, even if one tries to be strong. My parents, Margarita and Jaime, always had a favorite, my younger brother, Esteban. He was the sun that lit up their lives, while I was like a shadow they barely noticed. I'm not exaggerating when I say that since I was little, all the good things were for Esteban. The best toys, the nicest clothes, the words of encouragement, the warm smiles, everything was for him. I, on the other hand, received what was left over, if anything was left. I grew up in a house where comparisons were daily bread. "Look, Esteban, so intelligent, so charismatic," my mother said, while I barely got a, "You should try harder too, Alexander." My father was no better. He was always busy praising Esteban for anything, from a mediocre drawing to an average grade, at school. I, meanwhile, could get perfect grades or win a school contest, and all I got was a good. But don't get comfortable. It was as if my existence was an inconvenience to them. Despite that, I was never one to give up. When I finished high school, my parents made it clear there was no money for me to go to college. "We can't pay for everything, Alexander. Esteban needs more support. He has a bright future," my mother once told me with that cold look she always reserved for me. So at 18 years old, I started working at a shopping mall. It was a simple job, one that didn't require experience. I worked in a clothing store, folding shirts, organizing shelves, and smiling at customers even when I was exhausted. The salary wasn't much, but it was enough for basics, food, some clothes, and occasionally going out with friends. It was my way of keeping my head held high, proving to myself I didn't need my parents' approval to get ahead. Meanwhile, Esteban didn't work, not even trying. My parents justified it by saying he was finding his path or was too young to worry about such things. At 20 years old, all he did was spend his days at home playing video games or going out with friends, always with money that mysteriously never ran out. I, on the other hand, came home exhausted from work, with calloused hands and a head full of worries, only to hear my family's disparaging remarks. "I don't know how you keep working that mediocre job, Alexander," Esteban told me with a mocking smile while trying on a new jacket my parents had bought him. "You should aim higher, don't you think?" My mother nodded as if agreeing, and my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. It was as if my effort meant nothing to them. What kept my family afloat wasn't my parents' work, because, to be honest, they weren't working either. A couple of years ago, both lost their jobs. My mother said it was because of the economic crisis, and my father blamed bad luck, but the truth is I never saw them try to find something new. The reason we weren't on the street was my grandfather Antonio. He lived in another country, and since he retired had a generous pension and savings that seemed never-ending. Every month he sent money to cover the household bills, rent, utilities, food, everything. He even paid for Esteban's whims, like his brand clothes or expensive outings. My parents handled everything because, according to them, it was easier that way. I didn't see a cent of that money, but I didn't ask for it either. I've always believed one should earn their own. My grandfather Antonio was the only person in my life who really seemed to value me. When I was a child, I spent summers with him, and those were the best moments of my childhood. He took me fishing, taught me to fix things in his workshop, and always told me, "Alexander, you have something special. Don't let anyone make you feel less." He was the only one who made me feel worthwhile. But 3 years ago, he moved to another country, and since then I hadn't seen him. We talked on the phone occasionally, but the distance made our relationship limited to those short calls. Still, I knew I was his favorite grandson, even though he never said it with those words. It was something you felt in his voice, in the way he showed interest in me. My 23rd birthday was not very different from previous ones. My parents had never been enthusiastic about celebrating my birthdays. When I was little, at most they gave me a small cake and sang happy birthday with the same enthusiasm as singing the national anthem at school out of obligation. But that year, something was different. When I came home after a long shift at the mall, I found a cake on the kitchen table. It wasn't one of those cheap supermarket ones for 4 pesos with a frosting that fell apart when touched. My parents and Esteban were there and sang happy birthday with such reluctance it almost made me laugh. "Happy birthday, Alexander," said my mother, forcing a smile. My father barely grunted something, and Esteban didn't even look at me. He was busy with his phone. There were no gifts, no cards, nothing. Just that sad cake on the table. It seemed strange they had bothered to buy it because it wasn't their style. Then my mother said, "This is from your grandfather Antonio. He wanted you to have something for your day." I nodded gratefully, though something inside me said something didn't fit. Why had my parents, who never cared about me, arranged this? But I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe my grandfather had specifically asked them to do something for me. That night I cut the cake and we shared a piece each. Nobody said much, and the celebration lasted less than 10 minutes. Then everyone went back to their own things. Esteban to his room, my father to the couch to watch TV, and my mother to check her phone. I went to my room feeling lonelier than ever, but I let it go. It was my life, and I was used to it. What did seem strange was what happened afterward. In the following weeks, I noticed my parents and Esteban started behaving differently. Suddenly, they had money. It wasn't just that they paid the bills on time, but they started indulging themselves. My mother bought new clothes from those brands she used to say were a waste. My father showed up with an expensive watch, and Esteban was more unbearable than ever, bragging about a pair of designer sneakers and talking about a trip they planned to take. One day I overheard my mother talking on the phone about a vacation the three of them would take. Just us, a little getaway to relax, she said, as if I didn't exist. And that's how it was. They went on a trip for a week to a beach resort. I wasn't even invited. There's no space, Alexander, and besides you have to work, don't you? My father told me with a smile I couldn't tell if it was cruelty or mere indifference. I stayed home working my shifts at the mall while they uploaded photos to social media, smiling as if they were the perfect family. I won't lie, it hurt. But I also wondered where they were getting so much money. My grandfather always sent enough for the bills, but this was different. Was Antonio giving them more? I decided not to think too much about it. Maybe it was just that, an extra gift from my grandfather. I didn't want to get into trouble. A year passed and my life stayed the same. The same job at the mall, the same salary that barely covered my needs, the same family mockery. Esteban still didn't work, living like a king thanks to my grandfather's money, while my parents pampered him like a prince. I, meanwhile, kept being the target of their comments. Another year and you're still the same, Alexander, my mother said to me once with a tone dripping with contempt. At your age, you should have a better job. Esteban laughed and my father looked as if he agreed. I just gritted my teeth and kept going. When my 24th birthday arrived, I didn't expect anything special. I thought it would be another workday, another cheap cake if they bothered at all, and the same bored faces from my family. But then something unexpected happened. I received a call from my grandfather Antonio. His voice sounded warm, as always, but also excited. Alexander, little one, how are you? Today I will visit you for your birthday. I want to take you to dinner at the best restaurant in the city. Invite your parents and Esteban. This is a family celebration. I couldn't believe it. My grandfather was coming. I hadn't seen him in 3 years, and the idea of having him here filled me with a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. I accepted immediately, and he told me he would arrive at night. I was so excited. Finally, someone who truly loved me would be here. My grandfather kept his promise. He showed up at the door with his usual smile and a hug that made me feel like I was that child who spent summers with him again. He was a tall man, with white hair and an energy that didn't seem like someone his age. My parents and Esteban greeted him with forced smiles, as if they were nervous. I noticed my mother was quieter than usual, and my father kept looking at his phone. Esteban barely greeted my grandfather and stayed in a corner as if annoyed to be there. We went to the restaurant Antonio had chosen, one of those elegant places where waiters treat you like royalty. The food was incredible, and for a moment, I felt special. My grandfather didn't stop asking me how I was, how my job was going, what plans I had. It was the first time in a long time someone showed interest in me. My parents and Esteban, however, didn't seem to enjoy it much. They spoke little, and when they did, it was to make sarcastic comments about me. Another year at the mall, huh, Alexander? Esteban said with a giggle. So immature. You're still the same as always, my mother added. I tried to ignore them. I didn't want their words to ruin the moment. But then, after dinner, while we were having dessert, my grandfather looked at me with a smile and said something that changed everything. Alexander, tell me, did you like the gift I sent you last year? I was confused. The gift from last year. The only thing I had received was that horrible cake, and my parents had said it was from him. Oh yes. Thanks for the cake, Grandpa. My parents told me it was from you, I replied, trying to sound grateful. But Antonio's face changed. He frowned as if something didn't fit. Cake? He said, confused. I didn't send you any cake, Alexander. The atmosphere at the table tensed immediately. My parents, who had been silent until then, started shifting nervously in their seats. My mother tried to change the subject, saying something about how delicious the food was, but my grandfather didn't let her. Wait a moment, Margarita. What cake? I didn't send any cake. Then he looked at me and said, Alexander, didn't you like the car I sent you last year for your birthday? I felt like the world stopped. Car? What car? I looked at my grandfather completely lost. Which car? I didn't receive any car, Grandpa, just the cake that my parents said was from you. At that moment, I saw my mother's face turn pale, and my father dropped the fork onto the plate. Esteban, who always had something to say, fell silent, looking at the floor. Antonio slowly turned to my parents, and his expression was a mix of confusion and fury. What is going on here? He asked, in a voice that gave me goosebumps. I gave a car to Alexander, a sports car, as his birthday gift. Where is that car? My parents began to stammer. My mother said something about maybe there was a misunderstanding, and my father tried to blame the shipping company, saying maybe it never arrived, but my grandfather was not stupid. He slammed the table hard, making the glasses shake. Tell me right now what happened with that car or there will be consequences, he shouted. The restaurant fell silent. The other diners looked at us, but I didn't care. I had PCOS. A car. My grandfather had sent me a sports car and I hadn't received it. I looked at my parents expecting an explanation, but what came next was worse than I imagined. Between stammering and excuses, my mother finally confessed. We sold it, she said, almost in a whisper. We needed the money, Antonio. Things were hard, and my father interrupted, trying to justify himself. It was for the family's good. We couldn't maintain such an expensive car, and Esteban needed things. That was when I lost control. Esteban needed things, I shouted, unable to contain myself. And what about me? I don't matter? Why is it always him? My grandfather didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at them with a fury I'd never seen before. Then he spoke, and his words were like knives. I can't believe you betrayed my trust. I gave that car to Alexander, my grandson, the one who has always worked hard, who never asked for anything, and you sold it to spend it on clothes, trips, things for Esteban. Seriously, my parents tried to apologize, saying they wouldn't do it again, that it was a mistake. Esteban, for the first time, looked scared. But my grandfather didn't want to hear more. Not 1 cent more, he said, standing up from the table. It's over. Pay this bill yourselves. Then he looked at me and said, Alexander, let's go. We left the restaurant, and my grandfather took me to his car. While driving, he told me the whole truth. For years, he had been sending money. For me, not just for the house. He transferred money to my parents because he trusted them, but now he realized they had kept it all. The sports car wasn't the only thing. He had sent money so I could study, so I could have things to help me get ahead. But my parents had used it for themselves and for Esteban. I realized a long time ago how they treated you, Alexander.
He told me. The mockery, the way they made you feel less. But this was the last straw. I had PCOS, not just because of the car, but because of everything my grandfather had tried to do for me. I felt betrayed, but also relieved. Finally,
someone saw the truth. Then Antonio looked at me and said, You are not going to stay here with them. Come with me. I live in a country where you will have opportunities. I will help you start over. I didn't think twice. I accepted. 1 week later, I was on a plane with my grandfather heading to a new life. When I arrived at his house, I was impressed. It was a huge house with a garage full of sports cars. Pick one, he said, smiling. The one they stole from you is no longer here, but these are yours. I chose a bright red car, like from a movie. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. With my grandfather's help, I got a job at an important company. It wasn't just any job, it was a well-paid position with opportunities to grow. For the first time in my life, I felt I was worth something. My grandfather was proud, and so was I. A few months later, my phone started ringing. It was my parents and Esteban. I didn't answer the first call or the second. For weeks, my phone filled with messages and calls. I ignored them all because honestly, I didn't want anything to do with them. After what they had done, selling the car my grandfather had given me, using the money he sent for me on their own luxuries, mocking me for years, I felt no obligation to answer. But one night, after a long day at work, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to answer just to see how far their shamelessness would go. Alexander, is that you? My mother said on the other end of the line. Her voice sounded shaky, almost unrecognizable. She had always had that authoritative tone, as if I were a nuisance, but now she sounded desperate. We need to talk to you, please don't hang up. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. Things are hard. Your grandfather cut us off completely. We have no money, Alexander. We're going to be evicted next week if we don't pay rent. You're our family. You have to help us. I couldn't help it. I let out a dry laugh. Family. The word sounded ridiculous coming from me. Her mouth. Family, I said with a colder tone than I expected. Now I'm family. Where was that family? When they mocked me. When they sold the car my grandfather sent me to spend on branded clothes and trips for Esteban. Where was that family when they left me alone while they went on vacation? My mother tried to interrupt me, but I didn't. Let her. No, Margarita, don't come to me with that now. For years you treated me like I didn't exist, and now that you're in trouble, you remember me. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard my father's voice, who had taken the phone. Alexander, don't be ungrateful, he said with that tone of superiority he always used. We did what we could for you. Everything we did was for the good of the family. How dare you throw things in our face after all we gave you? That was too much. Give me what you gave me, I shouted. A cheap cake that wasn't even from you. Mockery every time I came home tired from work, or maybe the constant contempt while giving everything to Esteban. Don't make me laugh. Jimer. Then I heard Esteban murmuring something in the background. My mother returned to the phone and her tone changed to a softer, almost pleading one. Alexander, please. We're in a desperate situation. Esteban is looking for a job, but it's not easy. We have nothing and your grandfather doesn't answer us. You have a good job now. No, we heard you're at an important company. Just a little help, please. We are your family. The word family again. Every time they said it, I felt a mix of anger and disgust. You know what? I said, holding back the urge to scream. If you need help, ask Esteban. He was the favorite, right? The one who always had everything. Let him get you out of this now. I hung up without waiting for a response. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't just anger. It was a kind of relief. as if I had finally said what I had kept inside for years. Weeks later, my grandfather told me they had been evicted. They lived in a small place, barely surviving. Esteban, who had never worked, now had to fend for himself. My parents, who always thought they were superior, were in misery. I, on the other hand, was free. I had a good job, an incredible car, and most importantly, someone who believed in me. My grandfather Antonio gave me the opportunity my parents never wanted to give me, and for the first time in my life, I felt at peace.